Hello, folks. Let's wait a few minutes so that people can join. In the meantime, thanks Dan for posting the minutes page. Please log into that and register yourselves if you want. Another couple of minutes. One minute. Okay, folks, welcome to today's meeting. In agenda, we have three things, I see. We had nothing until this morning, but now I see three things. One is issue 72, which I think was the geolocation and similar. Yes. So Dan raised this issue recently, I would say, to discuss I think endorsement regarding location and of T's, geography and placement in data centers and stuff like that. That are relevant in certain regulatory contexts. Then, since you're here, I might want to hand it over to you to present the issue and discuss and drive the discussion over the items here.
Yeah, happy to do that. So let me drop this into chat so people can look at it directly themselves if they want. There's not a ton to read here. There's a few different ways that we can look at this. One is just sort of like general context. Usually, you're making a security decision that includes an attestation, but it's not like the entirety of the security context. So these things tend to be used in conjunction with some other flow that's already happening that already has some security measures in it. But we don't really have any documents that I'm aware of that talk about how you use attestation in practice. And we could also go, to something much more specific, which would be something like the geography or the data center. Is there some claim that you would want to somehow bind to the attestation so that you do have one package or one collection of artifacts that are somehow linked? So I think this could be approached from either end here, that we could look at something very specific, or we could kind of look at general patterns. It's always difficult to figure out, well, what's the first thing that we could do that would be substantive. I think when I look at the kind of documentation that we've got out there, we've got some very like use case centric material. That's sort of this document here. We've got something that's a little bit lower level of, here's some components that different ways that you can package artifacts that are confidential computing and executable artifacts. We've got sort of the technical overview, but there's really nothing in this very short list of documents that is guidance about how you use attestation in practice.
That sounds that sounds like a different topic than what I saw written. Because what I saw written was about how does it leverage for broader um, and for evaluating broader security policy than just what's immediately measured into the attested environment. And at least in my head, that's a different question than how do you just use that attested evidence, perhaps verified by verifier as part of your security enforcement. Um, and I'm not aware of like for the how the two work together. I'm not aware of if there are any kind of standard patterns. I'm not an expert in the area, but I suspect that there's lots of folks kind of doing it different ways. So I'm not sure whether such a document, an authoritative document, is feasible. Does such a kind of standard pattern even exist, or is it kind of like everybody rolls their own?
Yeah, and I think you're right. These are two separate things, but they're sort of interrelated. So I'm trying to toss out ideas about like work products that we could create so that it's not just a discussion about the art of the possible. Usama?
Yeah, hello. Yeah, it seems very interesting, and I think I posted, I don't know whether on tech or attestation, it seems very much relevant to the work that SIG already has adopted, attested TLS, where like the questions that you have posted, is this T in a data center that I expect? That to me is analogous to saying like the identity crisis that we have named it. And from my perspective, from formal perspective, that was one of the points on agenda. Like we have formally kind of, I believe, completed it. So, I mean, there is some overlap with the existing projects already, particularly from a tested TLS perspective. And your second question, for instance, is this T in a geography I expect permit? That's also very relevant to like we had some discussions also in tech once that you have to trust the how to say like the cloud provider for that location. And independent of all of that, with what we do here in the SIG or the tech, there is ongoing efforts in the IETF which are related to these location, geography, and all that. I can put the links in the chat. There are four drafts actually, and Michael Richardson presented that in the REDS working group, a kind of a summary of that that was kind of covering what the plan is and how the four drafts will somehow proceed together. So there is some overlap, I wanted to say already, in what the SIG is doing and what the IETF REDS is doing.
Yeah, thanks. Those links will be helpful. Greg?
Yeah. Osama mentioned, part of his what he described was what a cloud service provider may say about the circumstances. And I think from the technologies I understand, the scenarios I understand, and kind of what I see happening in my little corner of the universe, this appears there's like there seems to be a set of scenarios where basically there's a relying party ultimately trusts an additional party to for some for some qualifications about an attested environment. So here's some raw attestation evidence. It's trusted because it's in a TEE from a trusted hardware vendor. And then here's a party, perhaps it's a CSP, perhaps it's Azure or Google or AWS saying, oh, in addition, this TE is running in uh, a particular physical geography or something. Then maybe there's an operating system vendor, maybe like the Windows part of Microsoft says, oh, and by the way, based on these measurements, this TE is running, an up-to-date version of the Windows operating system. And then perhaps there's the workload um, author who's running some code in there. Perhaps it's Coca-Cola. So there's Coca-Cola saying, this is, a Coca-Cola service to whatever, deliver Coke to your house. So it seems like there's lots of parties that use, or perhaps there's an identity provider, right, that derives an identity based on this from some identity system. So it seems like there's lots of parties that ultimately may add some of these claims. And what I see here seems to be about kind of from the perspective of the CSP, putting in some claims about um, the confidential compute running in a cloud. But it seems like one of a whole pattern of things, and without some perhaps standards or discussions about how this all should work. Given what I'm saying is, since I work at creating tokens from verification service, all of this stuff is going to kind of naturally land as claims in a token produced by a verification service, and using the beauty of like COREM, behind the covers or behind the scenes, Coca-Cola will issue some endorsements, some COREM endorsements saying this is how you determine it's a Coca-Cola workload. Microsoft Windows might issue some endorsements saying this is how you determine it's a Windows operating system. So that's how the universe looks to me, like how it seems to be kind of the direction it seems to be going. And there's no documentation about that I'm aware of, but that's kind of what anyway, that's how this seems to be going in my mind.
Yeah, and I see Gary's hand is up. But first, let me just make sure I try to figure out what to capture from that. So when different entities or actors are going to add claims into that process, for you as the provider of the token, you view those as coming into that token creation service, or how would you phrase that?
Well, I mean, if I'm not saying it has to be this way. I'm saying as a verifier whose customer is a relying party, and a relying party is the one that's looking for these claims here, I think, right? Is this compute running in a particular data center? So it's a natural starting point for them to ask the verifier, can I, I'm already using, or wherever they're getting their, I guess, wherever they are getting their whatever they choose to use to make a trust decision. Perhaps it's their from their identity provider, but in my world, it's since I'm doing a verifier, the relying parties I talk to are the ones that are already using an attestation result token. And kind of to date, those are pretty kind of, as we're discussing, where those are very centric in the specifics of the TE technology. And these up-level kind of notions of what that means are are not yet there. But so it's an established relationship between a verifier and a relying party if they're and it's natural for them. It's a potential place to get the answer, but maybe so.
So maybe even something less exotic that uh, I've got, let's say, a encrypted disk with Azure, and the policy is something about having a confidential computing attestation, but it also has to be in conjunction with my uh, Azure ID for that service.
I didn't follow I'm trying to break that down in my head into kind of there's the measurements from a trusted TE environment, and then there's some party that says based on these measurements, I can give you some additional information that may be relevant to you, the relying party. So for what you just described, I didn't quite understand who
I'm just
that.
trying to start with something concrete that's
Okay.
actually in use today. And like, I don't think we necessarily need standards for everything. Sometimes there's just sort of like adopted patterns. So right now, I assume that Azure has uh, like encrypted storage and that you might have that integrated with confidential computing. Is that fair?
That may be the case. It's not in the token. There's no representation of that off the cuff in the that I can think of in the token claims that I'm working on. So the stuff I described is stuff that's from my work that's kind of coming in the near to medium future. It's not here yet. So we're kind of having these discussions. We're starting to work on some of these scenarios. So there's nothing out there that I'm immediately aware of. So someone will invariably dig something up and prove me wrong, but there's nothing I'm immediately aware of that matches this
Okay.
this in the world I work in.
Okay. Gary?
Yeah, thanks. Maybe this dovetails in what Greg was discussing, but take it back to a little bit of history. Um, with respect to the four questions that are being highlighted there, when we did RFC 9711 and the attestation token, and that was, I think, the first IETF specification that mentioned attested geolocation. We were actually going off of um, implementations with sophisticated integrated geolocation engines. So these were geolocation engines that weren't just dependent on GPS, but can actually get accurate indoor readings for geolocation. One of the things that there was a lot of resistance, though, was to do reverse geocoding services as part of the attestation services. It just wasn't something that was feasible. But to me, reverse geocoding is something that would lead to like other services where you can determine, okay, is the TE in a data center that I expect? Is the TE in a data center with physical protection? Um, are probably better done outside the attester environment. So if the relying party has a reliable attested indication of geolocation, then the relying party can actually access its favorite service, not just for reverse geocoding, but also any other information related to the questions that you've posed. I think expecting that out of the attester, though, is probably expanding the functionality of an attester to the point where you're actually potentially exposing it to attacks because it's not going to, if it needs to contact the database to say, hey, is my are my current coordinates corresponding to a physically protected environment? How does it know it's contacting a a trusted service? That would be fronting that database. So that's I think that's okay. So I don't think you can find the solution you're looking for in standards, or particularly attestation standards. Maybe maybe a white paper giving some guidance, but I'm still not sure it would be sufficiently versatile to answer your the four questions that are highlighted there, for all CC deployments.
Okay.
Um,
Greg?
Yeah, I have a question for Gary. When you say a tester, do you mean the attester creating the attestation evidence that then flows later to a verifier, or did you mean the verifier?
no, I meant the attester, not the verifier.
Okay.
So yeah, I'm just saying those four questions, in my opinion, are legitimate and important, particularly for data center deployments. It's as a it's not like the industry hasn't been working on this for a long time. Particularly with respect to, okay, how do you actually make a tested geolocation not only accurate but useful? But having that within the attester has proven to be very, very difficult to do.
Yeah, thanks. When I was speaking specifically about the verifier, and I think
Yeah,
it's really there's some source of trust that says, based on some measurements or something, I can tell you that, the answer to one of these questions. And whether that's integrated in downstream in the verifier or in some other token provider or through some trusted database the relying party looks up, those are all kind of, I think, design choices. And I guess, over time we'll see kind of what ends up um, working for customers.
So I'll wrap my section up here in a few minutes so that we leave enough time for Usama's topics. But I think one thing I run into is when I hear verifier, sometimes there's actually two different systems. There's the system that's verifying this kind of information, and then there's some other system that is applying this appraisal policy for attestation results that we also sometimes call a verifier, because the actual further downstream service that's relying on that decision is maybe something like a provisioning system or a key release system or something that is relying on something else that knows how to parse these attestation results. And so maybe one of the things I was hearing there is that these additional claims, they could be maybe provided by an attester, maybe provided by a verifier, because that verifier is also acting in the role of a data center owner. Or maybe there are things that are more specific to the relying party purpose.
I think that the verifier can expose or even potentially be configured with what endorsers it trusts, right? So there's no reason why an Azure customer couldn't use a Google verifier that a trust is configured to basically trust, Azure endorsements, right? The thing you're trusting is that the code that's executing the verification honors endorsements, let's say code endorsements correctly. And then you trust who signed those endorsements. So if the Google verification service can be configured to trust Azure endorsements, and customers can then have transparency to see that the endorsers that the Google verification service is trusting is the Azure endorsements. They can, it's I guess what I'm saying, it's not the trust here goes from relying party through the verifier to the signer of the endorsement on the upper left, right? And there can be lots of endorsers, on the upper left. There could, as I kind of described at the beginning, there could be the Windows part of Microsoft, the Azure part of Microsoft, Coca-Cola, the company, Pepsi, the company. There's the hardware providers with the endorsements for the TE measurements and so on. So the verifier ultimately is that little box. It has no policy, right? It's all coming in from external places. And as long as the relying party has transparency and can trust that how it's been configured, whether the verifier is a Google one or an AWS one or Azure or Joe running Verizon on some endpoint in the cloud, it's the trust is not the verifier, it's the policy the verifier is honoring.
Okay. Yeah, and it's maybe not important for this discussion, but I keep feeling like there's two boxes here and we only ever depict the one.
Well, I think I think of that what you described as the kind of the logic happening in the relying party. I think of that just from a terminology perspective. I don't tend to call that. Well, sometimes the verifier logic itself totally lives in the relying party. It's not broken off like into another service, right? Sometimes the authorization policy that a relying party wants, part of it runs in location A, let's just say verifying service, and part of it, for whatever reason, runs in the relying party process itself, right? But I don't. I guess you can still call it verifier. So I guess.
Yeah, I guess I'm thinking about the thing that does this policy appraisal.
Yeah, and that I wouldn't call verifier. I'm thinking like if you have, let's just say that MAA doesn't know how to honor endorsements from, some endorsements that are needed for your scenario, such as then you and your relying party would have to run a verifier. You have to run some of the verifier logic that ingests these endorsements. But if all you're doing in the relying party is saying, I'm just working strictly with 100% driven by the claims in the attestation results, then what you're doing, I don't call, a verifier. That's the logic in the relying party applying appraisal policy for attestation results. But if you have to do more than that, if the claims aren't enough, you have to say, oh, there's not a claim for, the data center. I got to do something else to logically get that information. Then you're acting as a verifier also, in my terminology.
Okay. Usama?
Yeah, I think maybe that relates. I'm not sure about that, but the key appraisal part that you mentioned about that, sorry, not the key appraisal, I mean the key retrieval part that you mentioned might relate to one of our drafts that I have put it in the chat. So the thing we are trying to do is that how would that be configured to get that key from the key store? I believe that was one of the things that you mentioned. I couldn't understand it fully, but there is ongoing standardization effort. And in the last IETF meeting, there was quite some support for this work. And we would be happy if, speaking as one of the authors of that work, I would be happy if there is anything that we can do as authors to kind of accommodate all the requests here. So we would very much appreciate any feedback on that.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, no, I was not aware of that work. I'll take a look. Thanks for the link. So I'm kind of thinking maybe I break this into two issues. There's what this kind of originally started as with how do we consider these other claims that are outside of the TEE, and then maybe create a second issue, which would be about creating more of a pattern or a usage doc that they could kind of live up here at this level, so that we really have no guidance publicly for how people actually use attestation, things very quickly drop down to very low level stuff. And I wonder if the SIG would be interested in producing a document like that that's more of a guidance to an adopter.
Sounds good.
Okay.
Thank you very much, Dan.
Mm-hmm. And Chong, I see you've joined. When I talked to Keith during the TAC meeting, he intimated that you were taking over his role here.
Yes, I have started on this. I've joined a few sessions, but I'm still new, so I would appreciate your help helping me on board this.
Yeah, definitely. So I'll think about how we can kind of maybe ramp you into a role for carrying one or two of these forward, or if you want to think about that, it would be great to have somebody who's dedicated here to help shepherd this. I'm not always available for the attestation SIG meetings.
Sure. Thanks.
Okay, so I'll try to add some more notes into this issue based on what we talked about today, and then create a separate issue for creating more of that guidance collateral.
Awesome. Thanks, Dan. Moving forward in the agenda, there's Usama with two topics. One has just popped up. Requesting SIG feedback on adopted projects. Okay, Usama, take it from here for both issues.
Yeah, thanks. The first one is very short. I have already an email on that. Just a request to the SIG. I think that all the requested or all the promised, I would not say requested, so because we self-requested this issue. So this was a project for attested TLS, and part of that was to analyze, formally specify and verify TLS protocols. Specifically, the way I read the proposal itself was very specific to for Sati TLS attestation draft, which is currently not being worked on because of the issues that were discovered. And so I see that the new work that is being done as out of scope of what I personally promised. I'm not claiming that was the intention here, but the way I read it was I was only intending for this specific draft. And we have another project where that's also adopted for key broker service, where we promise the post handshake part. And I believe that this work that we promised, along with the other project, which for which that was not the formal analysis was not itself a part of it. We did that analysis also, so that both parts lie in this repo. And I think on some date, which is like the 7th of October, I presented that. And I believe from my perspective, like sub project, so to say, of this, like this part is complete from my perspective. And I would like to have SIG feedback on if there is something that can be improved or that can be somehow that needs to be changed or something like that. And I, Mariam Thomas, have actually a paper which is accepted at Asia CCS. We are working on the preprint. We will make it public very soon. And I want to thank all the people from, some of them are from this SIG, like Thomas, Hannes, Yaron sometimes joins. Giri is a regular member of this, and many other have given very, very much useful feedback over several meetings. And that's pretty much it for this. With that, I have this second or a new proposal.
One question here. So you're
Yeah,
asking the group whether we consider the work done. Is
Yes,
this your request?
Yes, that's the request. Plus, Yeah, any review of that is very welcome. Like if something, some extension possibly or something like that is desired,
Yeah, you know that
feel
I have
free to.
some desires in this area, and I made
So you,
clear this
yeah,
morning. But
yeah,
yeah, so
yeah.
but with the thing I was going to ask is, what are you what do you want the comments on? So is it the Asia CCS paper that you want us to take a look and comment on, or is it the deliverables in terms of what the materials that you have stashed in the new repo? Or anything else?
Mm,
Can you give us a bit more guidance in terms of what are you expecting and
sure.
how?
So right. So for how part, I think it's easier. Maybe just email in the list. There is already one. Probably I don't have a link here, but I just posted in the charter, no topic discussion, agenda discussion. I will find the link and post again. So that's the easy part. It would be better if that's organized here, or maybe you can open. Anyone can open issues if
Okay.
that's the right way. So I wouldn't mind. Any way is fine for me. And your first question was about the desires. So your desires are a bit of out of scope from my understanding. I didn't intend to promise that I will provide a concrete attack scenario or a concrete implementation of the attacks. So to say, the way I read it is that I promised only that I will formally specify these protocols and verify that. And
Mhm.
from that
So,
perspective, yeah,
right. No, sorry. So maybe there's a misunderstanding here. I'm not asking for, in this context, I'm not asking for example attacks or whatever. I'm asking whether the modeling of the binder is complete and therefore whether all the possibilities are exhausted in terms of analysis. Yeah. But it doesn't matter. I will raise it
yeah,
as
sure.
an issue here so
Yeah.
that
So
we
the
can have
way,
this conversation.
sure. So maybe a very, very quick response to that. So the way I read it, I didn't promise that I will exhaust all the possible options. I just promised that this is the draft which is specifically mentioned there. I didn't promise, at least the way I read it, I didn't say that I will exhaust all possible options in intra handshake. But if you give me some concrete protocol diagram which you still think is possible, I would be happy to do it. So that's very much extensible. Folks are welcome to have a look. So it will need some small changes. If I have a diagram which says like what are the changes, for instance, would need some changes in not this one. It would need some small changes in this library, which is being used here, and specifically in the client process and the server process. Um, so it's going to be very easy. I would say if I have a diagram, then I can easily just adapt it to what you have in your mind. That would
Okay.
be
Okay. So
pretty
that's great.
fast.
So in terms of specifying what is the input of our desires. So
Sure,
protocol
sure. Yeah,
diagrams.
yeah.
Protocol diagrams. Okay, cool.
Protocol diagram would be very cool, very nice. Like the one I have presented in SIG already. I can try to find something maybe just to show you what I mean by that. So something like this would be very cool. So what folks can do is maybe just take one of those solutions that we have already verified. For instance, this is for TLS attest. If you have an idea, for example, you think that, oh, this that data sign, I don't want it like this. I want, instead of the nonce, actually it should be XYZ, and XYZ is derived somehow like this. That's sufficient for me. Just use it, maybe draw it by pencil, just print it and maybe write by pencil, pen, whatever, and then make a scan, put it in issue, and I will do it very happily. That would be good. And about the Asia CCS paper that you mentioned, the preprint we are finalizing, we have uh, definitely any feedback on that is welcome once we Once we have that ready, we will add it also in this repo somewhere over here to have a look, and I will send out an email when that's ready to review. So that would
Okay.
be very appreciated.
Thanks.
Cool. Then I want to propose a new thing, which is quite new in the sense that this field is evolving confidential AI agent, agentic AI very quickly because looking at the clock, we have less time. Yes, field is evolving. Terminology hell already exists. What I do is I use the terminology from my understanding of this specific paper, which is AI agents versus agentic AI, conceptual taxonomy, blah, blah, blah. And the core idea here is that I have a TLS client, TLS server, and typically we have workload here. What's different here is a specific type of a workload, which is AI agent. And the rest of the things are pretty much the same. Like we have attestation agent, attestation service, or whatever you want to call it, like for Intel SGX, TDX, that will be quoting enclave. And then underneath you have these confidential computing platform represented here as a hardware. So from TLS perspective, the roles are here. From attestation perspective, the roles are here. Pretty much the same diagram that I show you before for attested TLS, with the only difference that the workload here is the AI agent. And what I, from my perspective, see different here is that they are like special work type of workloads in the sense that they can keep changing. They learn from the environment. By definition, it's learning from the environment, taking that input, doing a new plan, and this cycle then repeats. So it's uh, pretty much different from a static workload, which remains static. You attest once and then you are happy that it will not change. That's not the case here. That makes it a very specific requirement-based thing that we can look into. And one of the questions I have for the sake for this discussion, or that we could possibly look into, is what exactly we need to attest for this kind of thing. What from my study so far, and I'm not an expert, by the way, for this, so I'm just exploring. So if you have ideas, feel free to share. What I explored was that I put into like agent configuration the several things that might be attested. I would like to attest, like any other workload, that the source code of this agent is correct, that I expect, for example, a specific LLM that I as a user was expecting it to run. Then the learning cycle that I mentioned here, the plan that this agent developed, that in a way it will solve this given like problem, that plan needs to be attested. I believe, like it's of course not well studied, but that's my understanding from discussion with Yuning and Peter, who are closely working on this topic. And the third thing, in my opinion, is the list of tools that the agent has access. So this agent might communicate with some other tools, and the list is important, that what kind of access it has and which tools. And the questions which are still open are like, what else do we need to attest for this specific scenario? And what's very important for this scenario is, what are the critical threats? What should we actually look into to try to see that what are we actually protecting via doing confidential computing and all the nice things. And there, what I currently believe is that prompt injections, meaning that the system plan that this agent has currently, it should not be modified. It should be integrity protected, as this attestation is saying. So someone should not be able to change that plan to what was attested to me, or what I believe is running on that agent side. And additionally, that there is no the AI agent I communicate with is not rogue. It's a genuine, authentic, whatever I expect it to be. And like, what is its identity is also one of the open questions. Am I really talking to this agent that I wanted to talk to? So there are quite a number of open questions here to and interesting problems, I would say, also to look into. I'm sure folks would have some thoughts on that. I will quickly just move through the slides. I have two more only, and then come back to slides for discussion. Probably we will have maybe 5 minutes or something. So this paper distinguishes AI agent versus agentic AI. AI agent is this single agent. And the way I read it, agentic AI is a multi-agent system that in this figure, sorry, I'm switching between the slides. So this was the user, this was the AI agent, which it is communicating with. And this agentic AI will mean that this main agent that I communicate with here is communicating with further many agents potentially, and they are all connected via attested TLS. And that's something that relates to the work that we have done or we are still doing, like 2, 3 open projects of the SIG, that we can utilize this specific use case to come up with the requirements that how can confidential computing specifically help in this specific use case of AI agents plus agentic AI, multiple of those instances. And compared to simple AI agent use case where I mentioned some of the threats, additional threats are that each one of those could, for some instances, spawn and delegate with high privileges. Like this agent could dedicate its task to this agent with high privileges. And do I, as a user, trust it to do that? And did I even expect it to do that? And things like that are uh, open for discussion. And also, like, what other threats should one consider in that case? And that's kind of my final slide, which is to say the exact same thing that I showed before, multi-agent. Like now I'm talking about the first slide was showing this part. I'm now talking about AI agent to AI agent communication, which is still via tested TLS that from TLS perspective, one of them will be the client, other will be the server, one of them will be the tester. From remote attestation perspective, other will be the verifying relying party, just for simplicity, as I always do. So verifier and relying party combined together for analysis purposes. They can be separate, of course. And the idea here is that they might do mutual attestation. So this might become attester. This might also become verifying relying party, depending on the use case. And that's pretty much it that I have prepared. And I think with that, I would open for discussion, questions. And the questions I have for you are, is there any interest in the SIG to kind of explore it further? And if yes, then how to limit the scope of this specific topic to AI agent, agentic AI, or what do you guys think about this topic? Okay, I don't
Is
hear
there anyone
anybody.
who wants to chime in? If not, maybe we can extend the discussion on the Slack channel and on
Sure.
the station SIG list.
Yeah, sure. Thanks a lot.
Actually, I got a question if you don't mind, Thomas. Just in general, this seems like the AI agent is acting within the context of a confidential compute container. What goes on inside the container? How much of what goes on inside the container is really within scope of of what we're doing in the SIG as far as that attestation is concerned? Because like take for instance, it seems like the way Osama you described it, the AI agent has a heavy dependency on integrity of its TLS implementation, right? And if the attester is to actually attest to that, to me, it seems like the attester would have to actually start to analyze the memory and the integrity of the code running in the container. This is just an example, but I mean, if that's the case, then I mean, aren't the confidential compute guarantees or for essentially computing in a confidential environment starting to be eaten away by doing that? And I can explain again if it's not very clear.
I don't think that's the case because the only person who can attest to the workload inside the container is the container itself, right? That's the only entity that has the ability to
Yes.
introspect its own memory.
Yes.
So the question is, how much can you trust the container to attest itself, its workload?
Yes.
That's supported with measuring the container at startup time to see if what's in the container is what you want it to be. And then maybe fixing the container to a read-only version of itself so there's no ability to update it after it's been executed, things like that. But you wouldn't erode confidential compute guarantees by having the container attest itself.
No, no, but I'm saying, but but the way it's being shown here, the attester is separate from the container. So that would be so that would be my question. It's like, what is happening within the container? If the container is attesting itself, what can the attester do in that case beyond what the container is doing? Or I mean, the attester is the way you described it, right? The attester is attested to the container upon launch, so it's attested to its integrity. It said whatever is expected to execute, has the signatures have passed, the hashes have passed. But anything after that, as far as execution is concerned, that's up to the container. The attester doesn't. If the attester was to attest further, like like in this case, is there a prompt attack of some sort? That's affecting the integrity of the container. I don't believe the attester is expected to pick that up. I think it's something that the container would have to actually attest to itself. Well, it just seems like it's totally outside of scope of what the SIG is doing, is supposed to be working on. Yeah, in short, I'm not seeing the problem here that that this particular SIG would be involved with as far as AI agents are concerned, at least the way it's presented. All right.
Thanks, Gary. We can continue the discussion on other channels. You have 5 minutes, Usama, to present the last one, I think, right? Do you have another item, isn't it?
Sorry, I was speaking with mute. Okay, so Giri, I was saying that basically that depends on how you deploy it, specifically in a container or something. So very quickly, I would say I think it depends on one of the deployment scenarios as well. And to David's point, I think that one specific, very, very, very specific requirements for this compared to what SIG has already done is that this can change at the runtime. The launch time measurement is not sufficient in this case because it has to keep learning. If it's not learning, there is no advantage of, I mean, there is no benefit of using this AI agent. If it's static and remains static all the time, then that's not learning, and then that's, I don't think that, according to some of the papers I have read, that wouldn't classify as an AI agent itself. So I mean to say there are some additional requirements which we need to consider from SIG perspective to what we have done specifically from the perspective of formal as well as the deployments that we have in the SIG projects currently.
So I didn't mean the data is stack. I meant the file system that the container is based on is stack. And we have this in multiple places in Linux already, right? We have read-only file systems that is based on, so that you could kind of have some sort of guarantee that your system libraries and your configurations and everything are not going to change it. You may have writable data locations somewhere in that container, but that's very different than the measurement of the container at startup, right? That's dynamic data that's changing over the lifetime of the container. You wouldn't expect, say, your glibc to get substituted out from under you while executing the work, which is what a read-only container would guarantee. Right? It would guarantee the static nature of the operating environment without the static nature of the data. Like you'd have to architect the container such that you had a mutable section of file system that handles whatever data.
I couldn't follow you very well. For me, it was breaking a bit, but it would be great if you can send it out on the list so we can probably follow there. That would be very interesting. Thanks.
Okay.
That's it, Usama? You're done with your presentation?
Yeah, I think that's done. So I have another idea, which is too short for 2 minutes, but there is this the aggregator thing that I can present at some point in time in the future. That's a separate idea. Probably that will resonate more with this SIG tool.
Okay, so
or
maybe
for
next
discussion.
time you
Sure.
can have 10 minutes to present that. Okay, awesome. So is there anything else that anyone wants to bring to the table in the remaining 1 minute? Otherwise, we can close this call. Thanks very much for joining and the great discussion. And yeah, thank you all, and see you in a couple of weeks. Bye-bye.
Yeah.
Thank you. Bye.
Take care, all.